Welcome to the Patriotic Pulpit. Think about for a moment the Democratic lies and cover ups. The Democratic National Convention is going on right now, and we not only see so many Democratic lies and cover ups, but also the very policy making, the statements they have in the Democratic National Platform. All of these things are so much misinformation and big, bold lies. As Saul Alinsky would tell them to do, don't tell a small lie, tell a big, bold lie. And that's exactly what we find the Democratic Party has aligned itself with, the Saul Alinsky lying tactic. Rules for radicals, and that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what they do. And these are not small lies, such as whether Joe Biden actually was a truck driver or whether he knew some popcorn Joe or what, all those kind of people that he talks about in the past. And you kind of get the sense that he's making up the stories as he trials along. But these are lies that are built into the system, built into the platform, built into the way that they present themselves to the American people. And all of it relies upon the absolute total ignorance of the American people not questioning whether or not these things are so. And that's exactly what the Democrats rely upon. So they're pouring out their ungodliness and lies right before the American people in the Democratic National Convention. Their platform, their speeches, the bills they sponsor, crammed with these. I wanted to do a show on the Democratic lies, but I try to keep the show at 30 minutes. So I thought, well, you can't get all of those things in there because we can just go on for days and days and days because the socialism, Marxism, the beat that they march to today basically is built on a tissue of lies. But I want to focus on 6 of them for just a moment. Number 1, the Democratic cover-ups, the lies that are told on the cover-up, and I'm speaking specifically about Joe Biden and his mental cognizance. Number 2, one of the statements that was made at the Democratic National Committee or Convention was that Kamala Harris loves kids. She loves kids. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then number 3, the right to protest. The Democrats are saying, well, we defend the right of people, the pro-Palestinian, the pro-Muslims, to be outside protesting, and we defend the right of them to say what they want to say. That's interesting because that is such a hypocritical stance, as we will see in just a moment. Number 4, I'm going to take to task even the labeled Democratic Party. It's not a Democratic Party, it's a Marxist socialist party. Let's call it that. Really not the Democratic Party at all. And then number 5, one of the bills was the Inflation Reduction Act. This relies upon, once again, the ignorance of the American people to understand what is inflation, what really is inflation. And then number 6, one of those issues that is always, of course, close to me, simply because I grew up in border states, and that is the border bill, or the statements they make on the Democratic platform is that we want to secure the border. I thought, anyway, so we'll talk about all of that and maybe a little bit more thrown in. So let's think about the policy lies that they have. And I'll begin, number 1, with the Kamala Harris cover-up. The basic, fundamental lie that has been told for many, many months, maybe a couple of 3 years, is Kamala Harris, the Democratic machine on the inside, the Barack Obamas, who actually we find out now, Republicans have been saying that there's been their power behind the throne, and it's Barack Obama's third term with Joe Biden. That appears to be exactly right because the Barack Obamas and the Kamala Harrises, they have been lying continually to the American people, telling us that Joe Biden is mentally fit, even though we saw that he was not mentally fit, that he's a cognitive mess, that he's not able to make decisions for the country, let alone for the world. And that's exactly what they've been doing. They've been covering up his state of mind. It's just a huge, huge cover-up. When it finally came to light, it was only at the debate because he was pushed out on stage, made to debate, and next thing you know, the American people, the Democrats, people just withdrew their support from Joe Biden, so much so that here's something else, that they decided to push him out of the leading position, out of the presidential position. They pushed him out. Now here's something I think is fascinating. Nancy Pelosi has, and as well as several anchors on CNN and NBC, have openly admitted that the Democrat machine from the inside has pushed Joe Biden out by force, and Nancy Pelosi makes no bones about it. She makes no apologies for it. She's proud of it. She says, because we want to win. That came out in the first night of the Democratic National Convention. It's come out also in several articles. But here's the interesting thing. When you have the libs on Fox News, such as the Leslie Marshalls, gets on there and say, they just, oh, they're so adamant to deny. Oh, no, Joe Biden was simply, I heard Leslie say this. She said, no, Joe Biden was simply shown the numbers, and he saw that his numbers were not going to win, and therefore, for the good of the country, he volunteered to step out, voluntarily backed away. So much baloney, so much nonsense. She doesn't want to confess the fact that they have power brokers behind the scene that are controlling the entire government, the entire Democratic Party, the Socialist Party of America. It's a power play. They pushed him out. They forced him out, and he had all the votes. Kamala Harris had none at that time, but they put her into place. This is what's going on, and that's why conservatives have called it a palace coup. And the reason that she did not want to confess it, and also the other liberal commentators on Fox News didn't want to confess it, is because it would be an open confession that this is a huge, huge power play, and that the American people and their will absolutely have no say-so in this at all. And that's exactly what's going on. This has been a cover-up. So another proof of this is simply just to note what Nancy Pelosi has pointed out. This is from the Economic Times. She pointed out she did it for the country. What did she do? Oh, she just went to show him the numbers? No. She was pushing him out, as the commentators on the liberal networks tell us. She pushed him out. She and Barack Obama absolutely forced him out of the running, and in order to put Kamala Harris in there. And she says, I make no apologies for it because I did it for the country. So it's crystal clear as to what happened. And yet the Democrats don't want to even confess it. They don't even want to say it. Now, this is from the New American. It says this: the former House Speaker and two television talkers, that would be Nancy Pelosi and two commentators on the mainstream media, confessed that President Joe Biden was indeed removed as a candidate in a palace coup. Biden himself stumbled through yet another teleprompter speech. The losing Democratic candidate in 2016, Hillary Clinton, claimed that Harris loves kids and families. We'll come to that one in just a moment. Loves kids and families. So the whole thing has been a huge stage production, but there is turmoil behind the scenes, and they are absolutely lying to the American people, and the Democrat commentators need to fess up and tell us that's exactly what's going on. But that tells us something. That tells us the Democrats are not run by a democratic process at all. They are run by power brokers at the top, period. End of story. So let's look at that last statement that was made by Hillary Clinton, and that is that Kamala Harris, loves kids and families. This would be lie number 2. Loves kids and families. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer said in so many words that vice presidential candidate Tim Walz is just like a woman. All in all, it's about what people would expect from the Democrats. So let's just talk about loving kids. I'm not going to even touch that Tim Walz is like a woman. You know what? Maybe so. Outside the Democratic convention, there's a van offering free abortions, free vasectomies. Yet they love kids. Science shows, they're all about science, supposedly. Medical science shows that life begins at conception, yet they want to destroy life to the moment of birth. As a matter of fact, we will talk about, Tim Walz will come back to this issue in just a little bit. He's really about infanticide. They really take the position of King Herod. So King Herod In biblical times, the book of Matthew, they've taken their notes from King Herod to put it into the Democratic platform. No one can deny that life begins at conception. It just cannot be denied. Yet they say they want to destroy life even to the point of birth. And Tim Walz, as well as other Democrats, have insisted on what really is called infanticide. Let's talk about line number 3. Line number 3 is that they always say they have a right to protest, and the people outside, that is the pro-Palestinian groups, the pro-Muslim groups, they have a right to protest. And they, of course, say everybody has a right to protest, and I would not disagree that people have a right to protest. However, if you're a conservative, if you're a constitutionalist, and if you believe the last election lacked integrity, that is, when Donald Trump was beaten by Joe Biden, if you believe that election lacked integrity, you have no right to protest. You cannot go to Washington, D.C. You cannot protest. You know what? I knew people, many people that were there in Washington, D.C. at the time, and everyone to the person tells me that it was the most patriotic, it was a country-loving, peaceable assembly where they sang God Bless America. They waited for speakers to come out. They simply wanted to show that they believed that the election had been stolen, that the integrity of our election system is lacking. If you believe that the integrity of our election system has been spoiled somewhere along the line, and I do, then you have no right to protest. So what do the Democrats say? They say, well, you're trying to do what? Overturn an election. You know, what a lie. And every Democratic senator, congressman, or spokesperson that came on the news stations and were talking to the anchors were saying, well, you know what? Republicans, they want to overturn, and Trump wants to overturn a due election, an election that was held with fairness and integrity. No, that's the very issue at stake, and that is, we don't believe, I never have believed, that the election had integrity that time. And it has come out consistently since then that there's so many states that have had integrity issues regarding the election. So you may protest, according to the Democrats, for anything. You may protest. As a matter of fact, Kamala Harris has bailed out of jail people who are burning down our cities, destruction of property, violence, theft. All of these things were going on in 2020, and she was posting statements on X to say that she wants people to bail them out. She bailed people out so that they go do some more destruction. So you may, according to Kamala Harris and the Democrats, Hillary Clinton and Tim Walz, you may protest to the point of destroying people's property, burning houses down, burning down federal buildings, destroying things, violence, trying to kill people. We saw that. That was on videotape. You may do all of that, and we're going to bail you out of jail because you're protesting what you think is inequity in our system. But if you think that we have lacking integrity of our elections, shut your mouth. You may not say anything. Don't come to Washington, D.C. If you do, what did the Democrats do after the January 6th protests were going on? Well, they cordoned off Washington, D.C. with a big fence. You can't come in here. You can't do that. Now, I'm not defending people trying to break into the Capitol building. I'm not trying to defend that at all. But the point is, you know, even the man with the bull horns on his head, what was this? Anyway, Chansley, he was put in prison. But, you know, when the videotapes came out, it showed that he was escorted peaceably through the halls of Congress. He was not threatening anybody. He was not threatening anyone's life. Nothing was going on like that. So they let him out of prison because they are relying upon lies about January 6th, right to protest. So once again, if you're a Muslim and you want to protest, you want to burn down, or if you're a Black Lives Matter Marxist, which that's what it is a Marxist organization, and you want to get out and burn down a police station, and you want to destroy private property, Kamala Harris is going to bail you out of jail. But if you think that the election has lacked integrity or we are failing in protecting our election, shut your mouth. You don't stand up, you don't say anything, and you don't get out and protest, and you don't march at all. That is the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. And while we're on it, let's just talk about Democratic Party. I think they should change their name. They're not going to, of course, because they want to make it softer than it really is. So the Democratic Party is really the Marxist Socialist Party. That's what it is. It's a Socialist Party of America. And it's really against America, so I would just call it the Socialist Party because its roots go back to Karl Marx, and that would go back over, of course, into Europe. Has nothing to do with American freedom, nothing to do with smallness of government. It's a Marxist Socialist Party. Now, here's something else interesting. I want you to notice this. Just thinking about this out loud. This comes to us. This is from the Federalist Papers. I think this one is written by James Madison. It is number 10 in the Federalist Papers, and he tells us a little bit about we're not even a democracy anyway. So, you know, all the news stations gets it wrong. Democracy 2024. We want to stand for democracy. Here's what our founders said about democracy. So from this view of the subject, it may be concluded that a pure democracy, by which I mean, Madison writes, a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person, can admit of no cure for the mischiefs of faction. Hence, it is such that democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention. Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property. Exactly what we've been talking about. And have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. What do they all turn into? According to Madison, according to Thomas Jefferson, according to all the founders, what did democracies always turn into? Totalitarian regimes. That's what they turn into. They turn into top-down control where you have the Hitler step into place, such as the Democratic Party is putting up. That's exactly why they said we didn't create a democracy, we created a republic. It's not a democracy. So the Democrats, however, have much more in common with the Marxists. As a matter of fact, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization. And this is that which they support. This is that which they fund. This is that which they legislate on behalf of. Black Lives Matter and all the allied orbit organizations. That is, all these organizations are lined up with Marxism. Despotism always begins with a big government, or big government is really despotism. So I want you to think about it this way. We have a triangle here. At the top of the triangle should be the executive office, that is the president, Congress, so forth, federal government. But as it goes down the pyramid, you have more power at the bottom, and that we are the people. The people are down here. That is, we want to control our own lives, make our own decisions. We don't want a government on top telling us at the bottom how to live our lives from Washington, D.C. So our founders created it that way. It's a pyramid in which all the power, as you go up the pyramid, gets smaller and smaller and more insignificant. But as you come down the pyramid, it gets stronger and stronger. So the strongest part of government that our founders said, according to our Constitution, should be at the local level, at the state level or the community level, then the state level, and then finally, at the federal level. What has been going on for 100 years, and the Democrats are trying to finish it off right here. They've turned that upside down, that triangle, that pyramid, upside down, so it looks like this. And so you have, at the bottom is the individual, and this gigantic government, the base of this pyramid is upside down, is all putting pressure on the individual. You see that in the Democratic platform where they have green energy, for example. green energy. They want to push green energy. So they're incentivizing for green energy. They're trying to drive us out of our cars, put us out of our cars. They don't want us to have an oil-based industry. They don't want that at all. Who's making the decision? They are at the top on how I live, how I mow my lawn, how I drive my car. This is how the Democrats operate. That is actually despotism. Despots. That doesn't even sound like freedom, does it? That's exactly what the Democratic Party is all about. That brings us to number 5, and that is one of the bills that was pushed through by Congress is the Inflation Reduction Act. What is the Inflation Reduction Act? Shows us the Democrats always play opposite day. That is, Inflation Reduction, it meant Inflation Increase Act. Because when they have billions of dollars printed, that is the very definition of inflation. To put more dollars out there, printing them, and so you have more dollars chasing fewer goods or fewer services, and so that is inflation. The prices automatically rise. Rising prices are the result of inflationary policies created by the Democratic Party, and I'm not saying the Republicans have been exempt from it, but by the Democrats in the Inflation Reduction Act. That is all about the increase of prices. And all they can say, Kamala Harris wants to say, well, we'll just put a cap on prices. How stupid. Because all that does is make the goods disappear. Because people can't produce the goods for what the price that they demand, that they charge for them. What is this? It is a totalitarian government. It is despotism. It's a despot at the top who tells the people on the bottom how much you can charge for your goods. Doesn't matter about the free market. Doesn't matter about free trade. No, get rid of that, because we'll tell you how much you could charge for your goods. That's what they're telling us. Once again, not to say Republicans have been exempt, but this is something that is just absolutely, it's not talked about enough. Inflation is the increase of the monetary supply. And when you increase the money, then each dollar is devalued. I illustrate it with students at school by saying, well, just take, for example, if you had a first-year Mickey Mantle baseball card, his rookie year, what was it, 1952, 3, I don't know, 1954, Mickey Mantle had his baseball, if you had a first year in mint condition baseball card, I don't know what it would be worth, but it would be worth a lot of money. But let's say, for example, that you found, let's say it would be worth $1,000 for one card. But you found in your attic a box of first year, mint condition, Mickey Mantle baseball cards. Let's say that you found a huge box or 2 or 3 boxes filled with them still in their wraps. Now you could go take those baseball cards to baseball card shops, and I probably go to one in Wichita Falls, and I go up to Oklahoma City, and boy, I'm going to get $1,000 for every card. But once those cards go out into the marketplace and there are more of them, then what? The price, and everybody sees this, even kids in juvenile detention can understand this, but Kamala Harris cannot. The price of the cards is going to decrease because there are more of them. So as the price of the card decreases, that is the value of the card, that's exactly representative of our paper money. Once you print this money out, the first users of it, this is how they get into thievery, the first users of it, big banks, big businesses, Biden's cronies, all the people that are insiders, the first users of that money, they have the face value of it. If it was a Mickey Mantle baseball card, they have $1,000 card, every card they have. But as it trickles down, oh, by the way, don't they talk about trickle-down economics? They don't like trickle-down economics? Oh, they do say that on the Democratic platform. They don't like, but once the money trickles down into the society, into the citizenry, it loses its value and the prices are going up. Prices rising is the result of too many dollars printed. And yet they call it and that is the definition of inflation, and yet they call it the Inflation Reduction Act. What a grand lie. let's look at this one. How about the border? I think no issue really, really gets close to me as the border issue does. So the border bill that was tried to be passed by the Senate, Mitch McConnell, James Lankford, Kristen Sinema from Arizona, back in February and March, these are all rhinos. Rhinos, even though Kristen Sinema is an independent, these are all rhinos. But what has happened here? They're blaming Donald Trump for lack of border security. What a joke. Biden is the one who came in, opened the borders up, and everybody knows it out here in America who has one eye and half sense. Everybody understands it. And yet they stand up there and say, well, Trump doesn't want to secure the border. What they mean is he opposed, he wasn't even in government, but there's conservatives that opposed in the Senate and particularly the House, the border bill that they passed. What was wrong with the border bill? Well, first of all, the rhinos passed it, such as Mitch McConnell, James Lankford. Such a sad story. Such a sad story because they have used James Lankford and Mitch McConnell and Kristen Sinema to bang the Republicans on the head. When they were trying to pass that bill, I said, this is what they're going to do. I knew they were going to do this. Why would the Republicans get behind it? So what was the bill about? Well, number one, it attached Ukraine funding to it. Billions and what was it, $138 billion to Ukraine, foreign aid. We didn't want that. The American people didn't want that, but they put that on the bill. So Republicans in the House said, no, we don't want that. But they said, oh, Donald Trump doesn't want to secure the border. And then the bill allowed catch and release. Is that what we want? No, it's not what we want. Turning illegals into the country, waiting for the court date. No one wants that. What we've been crying for decades, is that the congressmen and senators get enough backbone to enforce the laws that are already on the books. That's what we want to do. But the bill also allowed 5,000 illegals per day. Now, this is, according to Reuters, here's the statement that is made. Now, this is important because you look it up on PolitiFact and it says, no, it didn't allow 5,000 people per day. Once again, that is misinformation. Reuters tells us, independent Senator Kristen Sinema told reporters that the legislation would secure the U.S. southern border, including by requiring the DHS to temporarily shut down the frontier to most migrants if there were an average of more than 5,000 crossing attempts per day over 7 days. All right. So if more than 5,000 per day over 7 days, then federal government's going to shut the border down. President Biden said he would shut the border down. All right. That tells us immediately that the Democrats on television at the Democratic National Convention saying, well, Joe Biden, I don't remember who it was, he said the other day, well, Joe Biden respects the law. He can't do that himself. Here, they were already planning to do it. And yet they meet themselves coming and going. You don't know whether the snake that made the track is going south or coming back. This is not a bill that the American people wanted. I was so disappointed, have been in, once again, a neocon, Representative Dan Crenshaw from Texas. And here's a short article regarding his statements regarding that border bill. He's increasingly gaining notoriety as a voice for what's left of the neocon movement. He's calling on his party to not immediately shoot down a border and migration deal being worked out in the Senate. This was, of course, written back in March. Contrary to the sentiment of some of his GOP colleagues who have expressed misgivings about the legislation, Crenshaw said of the deal, the height of stupidity is having a strong opinion on something you know nothing about. So I don't have a strong opinion on the bill because I haven't seen it. Nobody has. End of quote. Well, right there, he shows you where he's going to go. Because the reports were already out that they were going to allow 5,000 people per day across the border before they shut it down. That was already reported. He said, well, I understand not reading it before making the decision. But you see right there, he's beginning to waffle. The Hill reported this in contrast to Mike Johnson, who warned that the bill, which would link the border policy changes to Ukraine aid, would be dead on arrival in the House if it reports about its contents are true. See, the reports were out that this was going to be, so Republicans started resisting it. Crenshaw seemingly defended the deal, saying that it would be a dereliction of duty to say no to the legislation if it indeed reduces illegal immigration. What? That is absolutely a stunning admission. We're not talking about simply reducing illegal immigration. Representative Crenshaw, how about sponsoring enforcement of the laws that are already on the books? How about we do that? The Hill further reported one point of contention between Republican critics and the deal's defenders is over new executive emergency border shutdown powers that would kick in after 5,000 crossings per day. That's the Hill reporting it. Johnson said this week that the authority should be utilized at 0 crossings per day. That's exactly right. It needs to be 0. Some conservatives have argued that the provision greenlights 5,000 illegal crossings per day, but James Lankford, such a disappointment, Oklahoma, one of the Republican negotiators on the deal, said that is misinformation. No, Lankford, even though he was a negotiator on it, he was putting out misinformation. It did indeed allow 5,000 people per day across the board, or across the border, before it would shut it down. There were some in the Senate and in the House who are desperately trying to sabotage it for other reasons. Maybe they think securing the border will help President Biden politically, which is, of course, it would, but I would, this is Crenshaw speaking, I would want to secure the border. That's what I told my voters I would do. Well, you're not securing the border. You're not securing the border if you're allowing 5,000 people per day. Here's what I want to know. I remember from the 1970s and 1980s forward, my family's been involved in it, my parents, my grandparents, as far back as I can remember, crying to the Senate and the Congress, whether it be in Arizona and Texas, and the United States Congress and Senate, to enforce the laws that are on the books and stop illegal immigration. Not letting 5,000 people per day, not allowing catch and release. Stop it. Instead, we are giving them money. We give them more money than we receive ourselves as American citizens. It's absolutely horrendous. So the whole thing about this border bill is simply the fact that it is a grand lie by the Democratic Party at the Democratic National Convention that Trump doesn't want to secure the borders. So first of all, the 5,000 person limit, it's an accurate reflection of their legislation, is absolutely preposterous. Speaker Johnson is correct to say the correct limit is 0. Given the magnitude of the crisis, the length of time it's continued up to this point, it warrants being shut down immediately and indefinitely until we were able to figure this thing out, not being able to allow 5,000 people per day. Secondly, note carefully the entire notion that some kind of legislative border migration deal must be reached in order to solve the crisis is false and ultimately nothing more than a dangled carrot intended to trick Republicans into giving Democrats a highly coveted Ukraine aid. The fact is, no legislative solution is necessary at all. Federal law explicitly prohibits the entry of illegal aliens, empowers the federal government with the means to stop them and deport them. Who is opposing that? The Democratic Party. That's who is opposing it. They want to rewrite the laws to allow, by law, thousands and thousands of illegals come in. So the lies and cover-ups by the Democratic Party at the convention and in some of the planks that they've had and in the legislation they've passed, absolutely anti-American. That's why I say they're a socialist party of America. It includes the Democratic cover-ups regarding Joe Biden. Kamala Harris loves kids. And then the right to protest the Democratic Party, not to be called Democratic, I don't think anymore, Inflation Reduction Act, and the border also.